This is the lecture for Chapter 3, which is Thinking Like a Researcher. The learning objectives to understand the terminology used by professional researchers in employing scientific thinking. What you need to formulate a solid research hypothesis, and the need for sound reasoning to enhance research results. Research and attitudes. Brand communities play a pivotal role for a brand connecting with its consumers. And as one of our never-ending friending focus group respondents notes, I want brands to be my friends. A researcher once told me that a brand is a promise delivered. When someone buys a product with a brand name on it, they have an expectation. That's the promise. Let's talk about the language of research here and several terms that are used by researchers to converse about applied and theoretical business problems. A concept is a bundle of meanings or characteristics associated with a certain concrete, unambiguous events or objects, conditions, or situations. The importance of conceptualization is discussed in the following slide. A construct is a definition specifically invented to represent an abstract phenomena for a given research project. Conceptual scheme is the interrelationship between concepts and constructs. An operational definition defines a variable in terms of specific measurement and testing criteria. An example of an operational definition is provided in slide 214. A variable is used as a synonym for the construct being studied. A proposition is a statement about observable phenomena that may be judged true or false. A hypothesis is a proposition formulated for empirical testing. A theory is a set of systematically interrelated concepts, definitions, and propositions that are advanced to explain or predict phenomena. A model is a representation of a system constructed to study some aspect of that system. We must attempt to measure concepts in a clear manner that others can understand. If concepts are not clearly conceptualized and measured, we will receive confusing answers. This illustrates some of the concepts and constructs relevant to job redesign. The concepts at the bottom of the exhibit, format accuracy, manuscript errors, and keyboarding speed, are the most concrete and easily measured. Keyboarding speed is just one concept in a group that defines a construct that the human resource analyst calls presentation quality. It is not directly observable like keyboard speed is. It's a term used to communicate a label or combination of meanings represented by three concepts. Concepts at the next level are vocabulary, syntax, and spelling. As they are related, the analyst groups them into a construct she calls language skill. Language skills is placed at a higher level of abstraction in the exhibit because two of the concepts that comprise it, vocabulary and syntax, are more difficult to observe and measure. The construct of job interest is not yet measured, nor are its components specified. Researchers often refer to such constructs as hypothetical constructs because they are inferred only from the data. They are presumed to exist, but no measure tests whether such constructs actually exist. One example also would be intelligence. We don't directly measure intelligence. An IQ test measures something called an intelligence quotient. And that's really not the same as intelligence, which is more difficult to define and much more of an abstract term. If research shows the concepts and constructs in this example to be interrelated, and if the conditions can be supported, then the analyst has a beginning of a conceptual scheme. One exercise you can try is to think about attempting to identify concepts and constructs in the hypothetical construct, job interest, and discuss which elements are truly measurable and how those measurements will support the more abstract construct. Operational definitions are definitions stated in terms of specific criteria for testing or measurement, such as an IQ test. The specifications must be so clear that any competent person using them would classify the objects in the same way. If a study of college students requires classifying students by class level, a definition of each category would be necessary. Students could be grouped by class level based on self-report, the number of years in school, or the number of credit hours completed. Credit hours is the most precise measure. In practice, the term variable is used as a synonym for the property being studied. In this context, a variable is a symbol of an event, act, characteristic, trait, or attribute that can be measured and to which we assign categorical values. The different types of variables are presented on the following slides. For the purposes of data entry and analysis, we assign numerical values to a variable based on that variable's properties. Dichotomous variables have only two values that reflect the absence or presence of a property. Variables can also take on values representing added categories, such as demographic variables. All such variables are said to be discrete since only certain values are possible. Let's look at things like gender. Gender is a dichotomous thing, and it's usually coded in a system. It may be 1 for females and 2 for males in data entry, so that you can then count up the number of 1s and the number of 2s and get your proportion of males to females. Ethnic background, educational level, and religious affiliation are discrete. They're categorical is another term for that. In other words, you could be a Lutheran, a Presbyterian, a Baptist, a Catholic, Jewish. All of those are part of religious affiliation, but there's no rank order to them. Moving on to the continuous thing here, we have things like income, which can range from a lot to a little, and it's a variable that runs along a continuum. Temperature is the same thing, and so is age. Continuous variables take on values within a given range. In some cases, it's an infinite set. This exhibit presents the commonly used synonyms for independent and dependent variables. An independent variable is the variable manipulated by the researcher to cause an effect on the dependent variable. The dependent variable is the variable expected to be affected by the manipulation of the independent variable, and that will respond to changes in the independent variable. So if the dependent variable is something like people feeling cold or hot, the independent variable may be raising or lowering the temperature in the room. There are various relationships among variable types, which we will talk about on subsequent slides here. So what we have here is the effects on productivity, and one would be a 4-day working week. And then you have some intervening variables, meeting attendance, the worker's age, even the weather. I guess this is an outdoor example. Now we have job satisfaction as another variable here. We have all of these variables that interact with each other in one form or another. So these are the relationships among variable types, and those are all represented in the chapter, and we'll discuss those later. Here we go. The introduction of a 4-day week will lead to higher productivity, especially among younger workers. Moderating variables are variables that are believed to have a significant contributory or contingent effect on the originally stated independent variable-dependent variable relationship. Whether a variable is treated as an independent or a moderating variable depends on the hypothesis. Examples of moderating variables are shown in the slide. Then we have extraneous variables. These are variables that could conceivably affect a given relationship. Some can be treated as independent or moderating variables, or assumed or excluded from the study. If an extraneous variable might confound the study, in other words, have an impact that you can't measure, the extraneous variable may be introduced as a control variable. So it's kept constant so that it is not allowed to affect the outcome. That can help interpret the relationship between the other variables. Among residents with less than high school education, the loss of jobs leads to high-risk behaviors, especially due to the proximity of the firing range. An intervening variable is a factor that affects the observed phenomenon but cannot be measured or manipulated. It is a conceptual mechanism through which the independent variable and the moderating variable might affect the dependent variable. A proposition is a statement about observable phenomena that may be judged true or false. A hypothesis is a proposition formulated for empirical testing. A case is the entity or the thing that the hypothesis talks about. When a hypothesis is based on more than one case, that would be a generalization. A descriptive hypothesis is a statement about the existence, the size, the form, or distribution of a variable. Researchers often use a research question rather than a descriptive hypothesis. So here's a descriptive hypothesis. In Detroit, our potato chip market share stands at 13.7%. American cities are experiencing budget difficulties. Either format is acceptable, whether you do it this way or you pose it as a question. What is the market share for our potato chips in Detroit? Another one, are American cities experiencing budget difficulties? The descriptive hypothesis has three advantages over the research question. Descriptive hypotheses encourage researchers to crystallize their thinking about the likely relationships. Descriptive hypotheses encourage researchers to think about the implications of a supported or rejected finding. Descriptive hypotheses are useful for testing statistical significance. This will be the end of Chapter 3, Part A. Please proceed to the next video.